welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. This show is for you, and so I would really appreciate your feedback. You can also do a ratings and review in the iTunes section. Thanks in advance, and now here's the show. Hi there, I hope you're well. In today's episode, I'm actually going to chat with Brodie Welsh, who's a Chinese medicine practitioner, and she combines both Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. And I was fascinated with this approach of combining these two ancient holistic healing systems. So we go into detail chatting about Chinese medicine and how she combines both of these wonderful healing traditions. So enjoy. Today's guest we welcome is Brodie Welsh. She is a licensed acupuncturist, board-certified herbalist, Chinese medicine expert, and self-care strategist. She's the founder of Life in Balance Acupuncture in Corvallis, Oregon, where she has been treating patients since 2003. In addition to her clinical practice, Brodie shares her expertise to help caring, conscious women take care of themselves through innovative Learn From Anywhere courses and coaching programs on stress management, digestive health, the body-mind connection, moving meditation, and Chinese medicine. She's also the creator and host of A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. Hi, Brodie. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for inviting me, Colette. It's great to talk to you.
Likewise. It's a pleasure to have you here. We connected on the podcast platform, a group in Facebook, and we connected because of our similar practices. And so tell me about your podcast, A Healthy Curiosity. I've definitely been tuning in, and I love it. And I'd love for you to share what you discuss on this show.
Yeah. So essentially, I had been practicing Chinese medicine since 2003, and in that time realized that I was repeating myself a lot. And that's actually how I got into producing online courses, because so often there's that the advice is the same, and so being able to have a platform where I could share with people who might not ever be able to come in and see me professionally, but still get the information that people need out into the world. And so, and I was thinking about sort of a healthy curiosity, what it takes to be well in a busy world. Like the conversations that I like to have are not necessarily, they weren't necessarily happening, because Chinese medicine does bring in it's this alternative that nobody goes looking for, right? Like people have no idea how many things that it can treat. And first of all, they might just associate it with acupuncture and not understand that it's this complete system of medicine, that it involves herbs, that involves movement, that involves meditation, all this. And that's true for so many of my friends who were practicing these little known healing modalities, and it's like they're helping so many people, and there was just a huge gap between people who know they have a problem and people with solutions. And so I just felt like, all right, well, if I bring some of these people in and have the kinds of conversations that could potentially bridge that gap between the people with the knowledge and the people who need the help. And so that's really what was inspiring to me. And so, and we go from things like, some of the episodes are really guest expert interviews, like the one that I did with you, where I'm talking to somebody who really knows something and has something to offer about a particular topic, or also just people who have figured something out about how to live in this crazy world with a bit of mindfulness, consciousness, intentionality, and thriving health. And so sometimes they're more casual conversations just about what people have learned along the way and what's working. And so we talk a lot about meditation, qigong, self-compassion, habit change, in addition to various particular modalities and conditions.
I love it. And, podcasting is such a great platform. It's free audio downloads, and people can listen to it anywhere, which is really wonderful. And I think that's why it's thriving, because people can be, going about their day and tuning in and getting this great information.
Absolutely. It's the university of life, right? Like where we get to just be constantly tuning into the conversations that are going to help shape who we want to be. And it's beautiful that we get we have this world of people out there in podcast land that we can get directed to our ears for free to make that car ride or that commute or that laundry folding or that hike or wherever you're listening that much more enjoyable.
Yeah, I know. I get excited for my new downloads daily, so it's a great platform. Now, I am intrigued with Chinese medicine, and that's what I wanted to discuss today, because my audience have a lot of knowledge on Ayurveda, but I would love for you to talk a little bit about Chinese medicine and how you got into the practice and how you began to study it and what intrigued you about it.
Well, the path was not direct. I was one of those kids who was sort of existentially burdened from an early age. I felt like I think when I was about 11 or 12, I just felt like the world was this mess. I really looked around and was like, what? I was not impressed with what I was seeing out there, that people were living these lives that didn't even seem connected to values to me. It was like what I saw around me was people trying to get good grades so that they could get into a good college, so that they could make some money, so that they could have a family and buy stuff and own a house. And, it just didn't seem very purposeful. And it's like, it just felt like, being born into this like relatively well-off middle-class household in the United States of America. I was well aware that I was more privileged than most of the planet. And I felt like, well, just by the way my family's doing things, like we have to drive a car to get everywhere, and we have to, we're buying food that is grown with pesticides that are killing the planet. And, all of my friends are wearing makeup that's tested on animals. And it was just one of those things where I felt like everything you do, you're complicit in something you don't believe in. And I was not I was looking at the world and feeling like I did not even have a right to be on the planet unless I was doing something to change things. And so I became this teenage activist, and I just felt like, so I felt like, okay, well, the world is mine to change. So I got really into the environmental movement. I got really into, women's rights and the queer movement, which incipient as it was back then, and just really just becoming the kind of person who advocated for the causes that I believed in. And so that's what I thought that I was going to be doing with my life when I studied economics and politics and history and social theory in college. I imagined myself running a nonprofit or entering politics in some way and changing the world with a capital C. Wow. And that I realized pretty quickly was going to create a life where I was constantly having to rile people up into a state of agitated fear in order to get them to do things. And I was like, this does not work for me at all, because I also had this sort of spiritual sense that I didn't want to, it just felt wrong to me to be constantly sort of stirring the pot. And thank God there are activists, this is not to take away at all from people doing that work, because it is so necessary. And yet I knew that for myself, it was not going to bring me fulfillment. So I felt like, okay, so even though I just have invested a considerable amount in my education, I'm going to just get a day job that I don't care about and go to school for massage therapy, because people had always told me that I had a gifted touch. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to go cultivate this intuitive part that I'd kind of long neglected. And in massage therapy school, I took a shiatsu class, and shiatsu is based in the theory of Chinese medicine. So I was learning about this idea that everything is energy and that energy exists inside us and around us and between us, which felt to me like a very spiritual concept. And that the idea that everything in the environment, everything in nature exists in our bodies as well. And so the elements of nature, just like in Ayurveda, there are elements, but it's a different 5 elements in Chinese medicine that we identify, that essentially we are these ecosystems. And so, and that with shiatsu, it's essentially opening these channels that energy zips around the body along in order to bring everything into balance and to create health. And so I just felt like it was this beautiful theory that I really loved. And the idea that if you refract light through a prism, you can see all the colors. That to me was like, wow, there are these dimensions of the world that we can call the 5 elements, and they can explain, each one of them has an emotion, an aspect of consciousness, a color, a taste, a season of the year, just associated with them. And that it changed my whole worldview from this materialistic living in a material world that's based on external actions to this world of energy. And it changed my thinking so much. And I realized that as much as I loved shiatsu, or I didn't necessarily even love shiatsu, I loved the theory. And as much as I wanted to make people feel better and help them heal doing massage, I knew that my brain was going to want to go into this complete system of medicine that's been around for thousands of years, that has so much richness, like herbs and theory of acupoints and what does it all do. And I wanted more tools to help people. So I went directly into my master's in Oriental medicine, which again, totally un-PC term, but that's what the degree was in. And it's basically a 3,000 hour program that trains people in what Chinese medicine is all about, and includes about 1,000 hours of clinical practice, and then opened my private practice back in 2003.
Great. So you found another vehicle, as it were, to bring your message to the world and to show people that we are part of nature, like you said, that we're part of a bigger ecosystem. Just like in Ayurveda, there's the 5 elements, and there's elements also in Chinese medicine. And you found another way to get that message across and connect people, rather than the agitated fear you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Is more compassionate and more of a tuning in with nature.
Well, exactly. And really being able to, I mean, really it was kind of this like the theoretical love for it and feeling, and this desire to, even from the very beginning, as soon as I opened my practice, I also started teaching classes, because I just felt like that truly what is sustainable in healthcare. It's like, certainly it's not going to a doctor and getting a medication to mask a symptom and taking that medication for the rest of your life without ever looking at the root cause. Now, of course, there are some conditions where taking a medicine from a doctor for the rest of your life is absolutely right and necessary and the best possible thing. But there's so many things like it doesn't make sense to take Tylenol or Advil or aspirin or whatever if you have a nail in your foot, right? It makes sense to pull the nail out of your foot so that you don't need to be on that painkiller day in and day out. And that it's the kind of thing where that so often there are other options that require not outsourcing your healthcare to someone else, but really being able to live in harmony with nature and in harmony with yourself, right. in harmony with life, and therefore be able to get to the roots of the problem rather than just treating symptoms over and over again and having to be reliant on someone else. So basically it was like, I just felt like if everyone could look through this lens of Chinese medicine, they would see what I see and they would understand themselves in a different way. Like as in Ayurveda, we think about Vata, Pitta, Kapha types of, that sort of like that we are born with this individual constitution that we come in with that has something to do with our physicality and something to do with our personality. And obviously these things we shape with our daily actions, but we do have this kind of blueprint that we come in with. And in Chinese medicine, we think about that blueprint as well, that we all have these innate strengths and weaknesses. And so when I looked at myself and I felt like, wow, I have a lot of wood in my constitution, wood being one of the elements of Chinese medicine that's about upward and outward growth and teaching and leading, and that sort of that very yang energy, that upward that dynamic, productive kind of that time. It's like understanding myself as a wood type changed the way that I lived, because then I understood what kinds of things were going to keep me in balance, and where I tend to do too much is my downfall. And so it's just like, because I only know how to add, I don't know how to subtract. And so just really, and that was the kind of thing where I was like, wow, I see people repeating these patterns that they basically are investing in as survival strategies. So if someone is, that is focused on perfectionism or people pleasing or being hypersocial or isolating or like whatever it is that they do to navigate the world, that, wow, if you can understand that this is part of your nature, but you don't want to be an exaggeration of yourself. You want to be the balanced version of yourself. And so helping people figure out like what is going to help them step into who they are, but not recognize, or to not use only that tool in the toolbox, because we have all 5 elements within us. And so the idea that like, I don't have to be productive and doing and a wood type all the time, right? Like, and that, so if I think about like, wow, I need to be having more fun. Do I need more spontaneity? Do I need my time alone? It's like, maybe I'll look to water or fire or earth or, some other element for what I need to balance me out in that moment. Wow, that was a lot.
It is brilliant. I love it. Just let it flow, sister.
All right.
And no, it's great. And that's why I was so intrigued to talk to you, because you're balancing Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, and they both have this ecological view to health of tuning into nature and that we are part of nature and tuning into the rhythms of nature. And you just touched on there how Ayurveda has the doshas of Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and then Chinese medicine has the elements as well. And it's all about, first of all, do a self-study, get to know yourself first, find out what your particular makeup is, and it makes a whole difference in your life. When I found out what my composition was of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, it changed everything, because I knew, for the first time in my life, I understood myself. It's like, the manual to life that we never receive as a kid. If we got this years earlier, goodness, I would have saved years of banging my head against a wall.
Right?
Trying to figure myself out.
Holy cow. If I knew a fraction of what I know now about, for example, the energetics of food, which both Chinese medicine and Ayurveda talk about, right? Everything we put into our bodies has a nature. It's either going to be warming or cooling. It's going to have a taste that, or neutral. It's going to have a taste that has an effect on the body, that all, we can make these generalizations, right? The taste of sweet builds the body. The taste of bitter clears heat and transforms dampness, and, things like that, that if I knew any of that when I was a kid, it would have spared me so much digestive issues and problems that I struggled with for years, which then, understanding more about, it's like, oh, right. Why isn't this taught in kindergarten?
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully there will be, a stage where it is thought,
right.
We're on the way there. We just need to keep doing the work, right?
True enough. Yep.
So I want to now find out how did Ayurveda come into your life, and then how do you combine both? Because while they're both based on nature and the elements, there are some similarities and then there are some differences. So I'd love to kind of get into that. And tell us first of all, how did Ayurveda come into your life?
Ayurveda came into my life via my sister, Claudia Welch. She is my half sister. She has about 8 years on me in terms of a head start. And she grew up in a different household. I grew up in Massachusetts. She was in Vermont. And so when I was about maybe 9 or 10, she was starting to get really interested in Ayurveda and going to India and learning Hindi and trying to get into Ayurveda school and, and studying Sanskrit and like all this stuff. And she was really in love with it. And that was something that she was exposed to through her spiritual teacher, who was someone that she was connected to through her mom. So not the family that I was growing up in. I was, and so at the time, and I knew that she was a vegetarian, and I knew that she, like, I would remember that just the certain things that she would talk about with Ayurveda, or like being in the car with her on a road trip, and she would teach us chants to Ganesh, or like these things that are just like ways to pass the time, whereas like we could have been singing like any of the typical songs that kids sang, and instead we were singing to to Vedic deities.
Wow.
And and like I think I had my first batch of khichdi made for me, like when she was cooking at living in our house for a little while when I was still just growing up, and so learning a little bit about doshas just sort of through osmosis. And so it's something that like she then went on and studied Chinese medicine, because Ayurveda doesn't really have, it's sort of in this legal gray area where like there's no medical licenses for Ayurveda in the United States, at least. And so so if you have the license to practice some kind of medicine, then you aren't going to get sued when you start talking about what herbs people should have and, like making these diet and lifestyle things. So she went to Chinese medical school so that she could have like an excuse to practice Ayurveda. And along the way, she ended up falling in love with that too. And she was actually one of my teachers in acupuncture school. She was teaching OBGYN. And then I studied, essentially, so Claudia is someone who's quite famous in the Ayurveda space.
Yes, I've certainly heard of her and listened to her. Yeah.
Yeah. So she really has, like, that's really her path. And she stopped practicing Chinese medicine many years ago. And so I feel like at this point I've been practicing Chinese medicine for longer than she was, and feel like Chinese medicine is more my home and more like where I'm comfortable. But I have herbs on my shelves that are from the Ayurvedic pharmacopoeia, and understanding what they do in the body. It's like, for example, there are classic herbs that we use in Chinese medicine. Well, instead of doing kind of one herb for one condition, we will blend into a synergistic combination, a whole bunch of herbs that all are aiming at the root of a condition as well as the branch, the symptom. And so if I'm trying to treat stress in Chinese medicine, if I'm trying to treat the nervous system, or I'm trying to treat somebody who's dealing with insomnia or digestive issues or irregular menses, or just like all the stuff that might be considered a liver qi stagnation imbalance in Chinese medicine. Well, Ayurvedic herbs could support that as well. And if I understand the nature of what they're doing in the body, their nature and energetics, Chinese medicine is also a system of medicine that involves energetics, and knowing sort of like what effects it's likely to have on the body can help me blend those medicines herbally. The other way that I currently use Ayurveda and Chinese medicine together is that as a yoga health coach. So I've studied yoga. I'm a teacher. I have a teacher certification in yoga, and also in healing qigong, which is basically energy yoga or Taoist yoga, if you want to think of it that way. And so basically, like, and it's one of those things where one of the components of healthy living is going to be to have a body-mind movement practice. Absolutely. And so that's one way that, like, I felt like, okay, why I did my yoga teacher training is because I wanted to bring that in. Also, just recognizing that if I'm going to treat back pain, being able to prescribe the self-care, the take-home stretches and exercises that people are going to need in order to take care of their backs. Yoga was something that was my love, and I was in the studio 6 days a week and doing a ton of yoga, and it just made sense that was going to be what I would want to share with patients. But a lot of people can't really access yoga for whatever reason. They don't see themselves in stretchy pants, or they don't see themselves as being someone who's capable of achieving these peak poses. And qigong is so much more accessible to a lot of people, because it's simply the combination of breath and movement and intention that can be done anywhere at any time, no matter how good a shape you're in, and it can be really easily modified. So I felt like, well, this is a way of teaching this practice that is common to both Ayurveda and Chinese medicine. And then the idea of dinacharya, or a daily daily routine
Yes.
of the yogis and sages. And so that's really where I go with my coaching program. I have a program called Level Up Your Life, and it's really about just all of the things that Ayurveda and Chinese medicine say that we need to do in order to be healthy. And because so often people will leave my office and they'll be all fired up to make a change, right? They'll be ready to get rid of sugar and alcohol or coffee or whatever it is that is taking them out of balance, or they'll be ready to start meditating, and they'll be all fired up for a few days, and then the motivation goes away. And so I see them the next month for a tune-up, and it's like I recognize that I needed a better container to support people in being able to really change habits. And so I actually studied habit change science, and quite deeply went into that when I first started creating online courses. And that really this idea in Ayurveda and in Chinese medicine, this idea that there's a right time of day to do things in order to balance out, just as like we want to live with the seasons, we want to live in harmony with the circadian rhythms of the day. And both Chinese medicine and Ayurveda have different ways of explaining that, but a lot of the advice is really the same. It's really resonant. And so being able to kind of pull that in as a way of helping people really apply the teachings of this ancient medicine to their current situation by means of preventing all the diseases. Because in Chinese medicine, the idea is the focus is indeed on prevention, and of course in similar concepts, like increases like, opposites balance each other. And certainly if we think about health, instead of thinking about it in this binary way as we're taught to in the West, it's not just like health on one side, disease on the other. In both Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, there's this middle ground that we call imbalance. And that imbalance exists on the level of energy before it shows up on the level of physical symptomology. And so being able to intervene at that level of imbalance, whether the tool of intervention is acupuncture or herbs or lifestyle or diet or whatever, that's where we want to focus, so that we can correct the things that are already out of balance, but also prevent future things from going out of balance.
Absolutely. And I heard this wonderful phrase recently on that subject, having an ecological view of health. Where we are a part of nature, we're a part of a grand ecosystem, and that tuning into nature and having this holistic approach and using mindfulness practices like yoga and qigong and breath work and meditation, so that we are having a holistic view of health. And now, modern science is agreeing with what these ancient wisdoms of Chinese medicine and Ayurveda knew thousands of years ago. And circadian medicine now is a thing, tuning into these natural energies of the day and going with them rather than going against them and suffering, right? Just tuning into those energies. And it is all about prevention and just understanding your body so that you can catch those subtle signals your body is giving you and bring it back into balance, like you said, before it manifests into something more serious. Because we get the little nudge on the shoulder, right? And then if we don't pay attention to that, we get a slap. If we don't pay attention to that, we get the 2x4, where our body is like, okay, I'm going to shut down until you literally pay attention to me. So that is all great information. And thank you so much for sharing all that. Now, so I want to kind of go into how do you think these ancient wisdoms are helpful in our world today? Why do you think that they're so important today?
Well, I'm going to go back 2,200 years to answer that question.
Okay, go ahead.
So the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine is this written down about 2,200 years ago, but probably older than that in terms of oral tradition. And it's basically this conversation between the Yellow Emperor, who may or may not have existed, and his chief physician. And basically they're kicking back, and he's asking, the Yellow Emperor is like, so why is it that in ancient times, right, ancient for 2,200 years ago, people used to live to 100 years without any diseases, like pretty strong, and these days people are barely making it past 50, without their bodies falling apart. What is up with that? And the chief physician, Chibo, his response is, well, people have lost the way of nature, right? Like people are living out of balance. And then he goes on to extrapolate and, and give some examples. But if anything, the world has only gotten faster than it was 2,200 years ago. We have got all this, there is what I like to refer to as yang addiction. So just like if we think about everything in life is qi, and the two major subdivisions of qi are going to be yin and yang. And that's probably a symbol that most people are familiar with, like the black and white ovals or porpoise-like symbols of that we see. It's like that. The yin side is the dark part, right? And that symbolizes that which is restful and calming and still and being and internal and feminine and yielding and intuitive and inner. And our world totally, first of all, it's patriarchal. It values the doing, it values the speed, it values the external, it values the material as opposed to the spiritual. It values the just doing more and doing it faster, and we're all running around busy and exhausted all the time, like that's a good thing. And really it's one of those things where if we understand that the nature of balance is that we need yin and yang, and that our culture has swallowed this yang addiction whole, and that as individuals we need to make a conscious choice to not opt into that, because then we will get sick, right? Like the ability to adapt to a sick culture is not health. It's like that does not help us. And so being able to reclaim what we want our lives to look like, as opposed to living for what other people, what society at large deems important, because society at large, like we know where that goes, right? If you, first of all, we know that stress contributes to 80 to 90% of all diseases, all reasons people go to a doctor, if not being the actual cause of all these things. Then we look at the standard American diet and what people are eating, and basically we have that's cancer, that's heart disease, that's arthritis, that's autoimmune disease, that's everything. And so thinking about it, just that getting back to the wisdom of simply like what it is to, what does balance look like? And balance does not look like everything getting an equal slice of the pie all the time and everybody being the same, but it really is about living according to who we really are and being who we were born to be.
Right. Absolutely. Totally agree here. And it's all about, like you said, getting back to the basics, right? And like we talked about earlier, is understanding yourself so that you are empowered to make your own decisions and know where you thrive in life. What are your, like you talked about, you were, an activist, you were a educator, a leader, and that's your skill sets. So understanding that will help you thrive, and also just to be empowered to take your own path, rather than feeling you have to follow others, is making your own way in the world. And just by understanding yourself and keeping yourself in balance, that life flows, rather than, when we get away from nature, the further we are away from nature, the more we suffer. Whereas where we're connected, there's more of a flow.
Absolutely. And that's really, like on a personal level, that's what I love about the work that I'm doing now, is because I get to be my earth element self when I'm in clinic and I'm holding space for suffering, because the earth is supportive and generous and loving and sympathetic and empathetic. And it's like, but if I did that all the time, it's like, I'm not naturally an earth type like that. Like doing that all the time would be draining for me. So doing that a few days a week, and also coupling that with the strategic problem solving that's involved in medicine, it's like that feels really good to me. But there's this other part, like if I wasn't teaching and really like democratizing Chinese medicine also, that would part would be unfulfilled. And so figuring out a way of like, just that, and this can be something that everyone does, is like, where in my life do I get to be this version of me? And what kinds of conversations do I need to be part of in order to bring out these other elements?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I see there's definitely a correlation then between wood and kapha, right, in Ayurveda.
Between earth and kapha, I think you mean, right?
Excuse me, yes,
Yeah.
earth and kapha, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Like, so earth, yes, that kapha being a combination of earth and water in Ayurveda. Yeah. Like that's just that kapha it's cohesive, and earth is all about harmonizing, and everybody, and like taste is sweet, and it's about everybody getting along, and, that in harmony, and wood actually disrupts earth, right? Like speaking up, getting big, right? Getting angry, getting assertive, like these things that we associate with the wood element it's like oftentimes that's the medicine for being too earthy, too codependent, too accommodating of things that we shouldn't really tolerate. Like it's sort of a natural balancer, but it also means like sort of if those were my dominant elements, that there's sort of a potential for an internal conflict unless you figure it out.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, looking holistically and looking at all aspects of yourself and making sure everything's fulfilled.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brodie, I have to thank you so much for sharing all this wonderful wisdom today. And, as a sister in holistic health, we need more people out there spreading this word and getting people to tune into themselves, their true nature, and to Mother Nature. And I think that we can make a big difference in the world by spreading this message. So it's just fantastic to hear your work and to hear all this wonderful wisdom you're putting out. And actually, on that note, I'd love to have you give some piece of wisdom or advice to our listeners today. If there was one thing you could have as a takeaway, what would you share?
Do less.
There you go.
I mean, I say that as a yang addict, right? I say that because it's the hardest advice to actually take, and yet it is like if you are overwhelmed, if you are stressed out, like it's the rare thing that we have the freedom to just do nothing with our lives. Like we all have responsibilities, and we all have people that we care about, and things that we quote unquote have to do, but plug the leaks, like come back to what's really important to you, and decide which plants you're going to water in your garden so that they can thrive and so that you can thrive, because when it's going in a zillion directions, it's going to feel stressed out, burned out, and that does not go well. So it really, I feel like so much of what I want to say to people is, perhaps maybe in order to do less, you need to recognize that you have the right to take care of yourself.
Yes.
And that is perhaps a radical act and perhaps a feminist act, because women are often socialized to take care of everyone else and need to do more in order to earn the same amount of money, etc. Yeah. So it's like seeing it as being, as part of that being the change that we wish to see in the world. I want to see women take care of themselves, put themselves on their own to-do lists, and slow down.
Great. Self-compassion, right? Compassion came up at the start of the conversation.
Yes.
We're going to close out with that.
Yes. And recognizing that this actually doesn't take away from doing our work in the world, that it actually is essential to it.
Yeah. It gives us a stronger base and a stronger foundation, and more.
Exactly.
Then once we're in balance, that intuition will come and we'll know our path to take, and we'll just flow more with life. So yes.
Absolutely.
Wonderful, my dear. Okay, can you tell us where people can find out more information, and if there's anything that you would like to share, anything that you have coming up, or courses with our listeners?
Absolutely. BrodieWelch.com. Brodie with an IE, Welch with a CH is the home online. And I don't exactly know when this podcast is airing, but I have a couple of offerings this fall that I'm gearing up for. One is a Basics of Chinese Medicine course, which launches on the 18th of October. And that is all about, basically nobody is teaching Chinese medical theory to lay people. And I was so in love with it that I just felt like, okay, maybe this is mine to do, because I've sat at the feet of Taoist masters. I have spent a ridiculous amount of money on my education, and it's like, there's no reason that everyone should have to do that. So like if I can share what I know with people in ways of helping people understand their element type, yin and yang, the concept of qi, to learn a few, a dozen or so acupoints and the essential oils that might go with them, that to give people a sense of that lens, that's launching on October 18th rather. And if you're more interested in transformation rather than information, October 10th, I have a program called Level Up Your Life, which is that basically bridging the gap between what you know you should be doing for yourself and actually doing it. And I run that a few times a year.
Great.
And then perennially, of course, I have my online Qigong class. And basically that is in case you don't have a Qigong master handy in your hometown. This is a way of learning it, as well as getting a little bit familiar with the connection between the organ systems in Chinese medicine, the movements that go with them, and as well as their emotional and spiritual aspects.
Love it. All great resources. And I'll put the link to your website in the show notes. And like you said, if this episode maybe airs a little bit later, that you repeat those courses so people can just check out the next date on your website, right?
Yeah, I sure do. And to get connected is, I have a newsletter. I send out emails very infrequently, but it is how I let people know when things are going on. Really? This has been such a blast, Colette. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation. I've learned a lot today. So Brodie, thank you so much. And thank you for all the work you're doing and, bringing this wonderful holistic healing system and mindfulness to everybody. It's wonderful. Keep up the great work, sister.
You too.
Thank you. Take good care of yourself. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Brodie Welsh, and we talked in this episode about understanding your unique constitution, your unique mind-body type. If you're interested in finding out and determining your individual constitution, you can head over to my website where I have a free ebook called Introduction to Ayurveda. And in that ebook, I have a free dosha quiz. So you can complete the dosha quiz and then set up a free 30-minute discovery call with me where we'll discuss your results and I'll give you tips on how to live for your unique constitution, how to keep yourself in balance, and any questions that you have we can cover. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes, but it'll give me the start of the journey to finding out what your unique mind-body type is, and it will help empower you to go forward making confident decisions for your own health and become your own healer. Thank you for tuning in, and please subscribe if you like the content, and you'll automatically receive the downloads when each episode is released. And if you wish, you could rate and review the show, which really helps me and helps others to find the show. So thank you so much. Take good care of yourself.